Unsolved murders are tough for everyone involved: the police, the families of the victims, and the public. It's especially hard when these cases go years without being solved. But thankfully, thanks to improvements in DNA technology, more and more old cases are getting solved each year. Here are 5 cases that were solved in 2022. Sophie Sergey was born in 1973 in rural Pikas Point, Alaska. It was a place belonging to the Yupik people and was located along the Yukon River. Sophie had dreams of joining the Navy, but she couldn't because she was only 4 feet 9 inches tall, which didn't meet the requirements. So instead, she decided to go to college to study marine biology because she loved whales and wanted to work with them. She was the first person in her family to go to college, aiming to create a better life for herself and her family. Sophie got a scholarship to the University of Alaska Fairbanks, which was a big change for her. The university was far from her village, and it was much more urban than what she was used to. She found solace in the Rural Student Services Organization, where she met her friend Shirley Wassily. In 1992, Sophie took a break from college to undergo jaw surgery and orthodontic work for her overbite. Since she had to work in Pikas Point to get health insurance, she would fly back to Fairbanks every few months for her treatment and appointments. Shirley, Sophie's friend, had a dorm room on a floor only for girls at UAF's campus, so when Sophie was in Fairbanks, she would stay there to save money. On April 24, 1993, which was a Saturday, Shirley and Sophie spent the day together. They had lunch, ran some errands, and hung out at the dorm. On Sunday, Shirley was busy getting ready for final exams and doing schoolwork. According to Shirley, Sophie had plans to go to a movie with some friends that night. After Sophie went to the movie and Shirley studied, they met back at the dorm. Shirley's boyfriend, Noah, ordered pizza for them. Around 1 a.m., they decided to call it a night. As usual, Shirley gave Sophie the dorm room to herself while she stayed with Noah. Before Shirley and Noah left, Sophie asked if she could smoke a cigarette. Since it was freezing outside, Shirley suggested Sophie use the bathroom down the hall, which had vents to suck up the smoke. After they left, Shirley noticed a few people in the hallway, including a man she didn't recognize. She made eye contact with him, but didn't realize who he was until many years later. The next morning, April 26th, Shirley returned to her dorm. She was a little annoyed to find the door unlocked, the bed made, and the TV and light still on. She assumed Sophie had already gotten up and ready for the day. In the shared bathroom on that floor, she called out to the closed shower stalls, asking if Sophie was there. Someone responded, "Yeah, I'm here." Shirley accepted the response, took a shower, and went back to her dorm, leaving a note for Sophie to call her later. But when Shirley got back home, everything was as she left it, and Sophie hadn't contacted her. That's when Shirley started to worry. She asked around to see if anyone had seen Sophie. She even called Sophie's orthodontist, where she had an appointment, but they said Sophie never showed up. While this was going on, students around campus started talking about a police presence at Bartlett Hall, the dorm where Shirley lived. By the time Shirley heard about it, she knew something serious had happened. A body had been found. Shirley hurried back to her building, Bartlett Hall, where she was stopped by police who wouldn't let her in. She explained that she was looking for a friend, and they started asking her questions. As Shirley and Noah were being questioned by an officer, another state trooper found Sophie's ID in the room and recognized her as the girl whose body they found in the bathroom. It was a female janitor who found her when cleaning the shower and bath area. Sophie had been badly hurt, and the way her clothes were positioned suggested that the crime was sexually motivated. Investigators started by interviewing everyone on the floor. Since Sophie was attacked in the early hours of the morning, most students reported being in bed and didn't see or hear anything unusual. It was surprising that no one saw the man leaving the bathroom on a floor designated for females, which would usually draw attention. However, it wasn't uncommon for men to be seen in the bathrooms on all female floors. Sometimes, men attending parties on these floors used the bathrooms to avoid going to the male-only floors. UAF had recently faced budget cuts, leading to reduced security measures in dorms, and there were no strict regulations on who could be on each floor at any given time. Despite investigators' efforts, years went by without finding Sophie's killer. However, in December 2018, 25 years after the murder, investigators received a call from a genetic genealogist. They had managed to create a DNA profile from evidence collected at the crime scene. Using this profile, they traced a family tree until they found a match: Stephen Harris Downs. This discovery led investigators all the way to Maine, where 44-year-old Downs was arrested and charged with Sophie's murder. When interviewed by Maine State Police and Alaska State Troopers, Downs claimed that in 1992 he was enrolled at UAF and lived in Bartlett Hall. He and his roommates had been questioned when Sophie's body was found, and at that time, he said he didn't have any useful information. In 2019, he reiterated this, mentioning he remembered a girl being murdered in his dorm building but didn't know much more. Downs insisted he was on the 4th floor with his girlfriend that night and denied ever being on the 2nd floor. He suggested that the killer might have been a soldier from nearby Fort Wainwright, as soldiers were known to party in Bartlett Hall. Investigators needed direct evidence to connect Downs to the case since he wasn't going to confess. Since he had no previous charges or convictions that required him to provide DNA, police obtained a search warrant for a cheek swab, which matched the DNA from the crime scene. In February 2019, Downs was charged with first-degree murder and first-degree sexual assault of Sophie Sergey. After deliberating for 20 hours in February 2022, a jury found him guilty of Sophie's murder. He will be sentenced on September 26th and 27th. Investigators believe Downs didn't know Sophie before the murder. Lucille Hholgren, a 79-year-old resident of Galt, California, lived with her husband Frank for 25 years. They were known for their kindness and hospitality, often welcoming neighborhood kids into their home with cookies and lemonade during the summer. Unfortunately, a few months before Lucille's murder, Frank passed away due to Alzheimer's disease. Despite this loss, Lucille remained active in her church and community. When Lucille didn't show up to church on May 22, 1988, her friends became concerned and decided to check on her. They found her home's sliding glass door partially open and made a horrifying discovery: Lucille's lifeless body in her bedroom. She had been stabbed, strangled, and sexually assaulted. Shockingly, there were no signs of forced entry. An autopsy revealed Lucille had been dead for 2 to 5 days before being found. Multiple agencies, including the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office and the California Department of Justice, collected evidence from the scene. However, the amount of DNA they collected was too small to be useful, and the case went cold. It wasn't until January 2022 that the Sacramento County Crime Lab re-examined the DNA evidence and found a match. DNA scrapings from under Lucille's fingernails and bodily fluids on her bedding matched Terry Leroy Bramble. Bramble, 32 years old at the time of the murder, was not previously a suspect and died in 2011 from natural causes. Police are now investigating whether Bramble may be linked to other unsolved cases. Despite this breakthrough, police still don't know Bramble's motive for killing Lucille or if they ever crossed paths. Lucille's son, now the same age his mother was when she died, finds closure in finally knowing his mother's killer after 34 years. Lee Peterson, also known as Tori, was born on September 29, 1949, in North Dakota. She was the oldest of 4 siblings and grew up in the Midwestern United States. Lee had a passion for art and horses, and as an adult, she fulfilled her dream of owning a horse. She earned a bachelor's degree in dietary services from the University of Wisconsin and later obtained a master's degree in food and nutrition. On November 14, 1970, she married Anthony Rotatori, and they had a son named Michael. In 1977, Lee's marriage to Anthony ended in divorce, and their son Michael lived with his dad in Chicago. Lee then married Gerald Jerry Nemke in August 1978, but she kept her last name from her first marriage. Lee and Jerry divorced in 1979, but remarried in December 1981. In 1982, Lee moved to Council Bluffs, Iowa, for a job as a food service director at a hospital. She initially stayed in room 106 at a Best Western motel until Jerry joined her with their mobile home. On Monday, June 21st, Lee began orientation for her new job. That Thursday, She went boating with friends she met at work. They stopped at McDonald's before Lee returned to the motel. The next day, Friday the 25th, a motel employee found Lee dead in her room. She appeared to have been deceased for about 12 hours and had a single stab wound. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle, but evidence indicated she had been sexually assaulted. Some of Lee's belongings, like her purse and jewelry, were missing, but robbery wasn't believed to be the motive. Due to the motel's proximity to major interstates and the time that had passed since the crime, investigators realized the perpetrator could be anywhere by now. Initially, Lee's husband Jerry was a suspect due to his criminal record, including a past arrest in connection with violent crimes. However, he had a solid alibi for the night of Lee's death and was ruled out as a suspect. The hospital where Lee had just started working and the Best Western where she was staying both contributed $1,000 for a reward to anyone with information leading to the killer. However, the case went cold. In 2001, investigators sent the evidence from the crime scene to the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation Lab for further analysis. They found a male DNA profile, but it didn't match anyone in any databases. Over the next few years, they continued testing this DNA against samples and databases, but no matches were found. In 2018, Council Bluffs police sent the DNA to Parabon with the hope of solving the case through genetic genealogy. By early 2021, they found a match to the DNA, Thomas Freeman. They confirmed this by analyzing a DNA sample from Freeman's daughter, revealing a parent-child relationship between the DNA from the crime scene and Freeman's daughter. In February 2022, the Council Bluffs Police Department announced their findings. Freeman, 35 years old at the time of Lee's death, was found dead in a shallow grave in Illinois, about 3 months before his discovery. He had sustained multiple gunshot wounds. His killer remains unidentified, but police are reinvestigating to see if there are any potential connections to Lee's murder. Unfortunately, Lee's husband Jerry passed away in 2019 before learning who killed his wife. Lisa Frassi was born in New Jersey in 1958 with dreams of becoming a nurse. Her friend Renee described her as caring, like a nurse, always ready to sit with people who needed help. By 1987, Lisa was living in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and working in a hospital. One night, she had an encounter with the law when she was driving with a 49-year-old man. They were pulled over for a broken tag light, but Lisa was arrested because she was driving with a suspended license. During the arrest, police found cocaine residue in the vehicle and conducted a search, discovering 1.5 kilos of cocaine and 28 grams of marijuana. As a result, Lisa faced multiple charges, including possession and trafficking of cocaine. By 1990, it seemed Lisa had moved past this incident. She relocated to Hawaii and began working as an exotic dancer to save money for nursing school. In early October 1994, Lisa had recently ended a 7-month relationship with her boyfriend, who was a police officer with the Honolulu Police Department. Despite the breakup, she remained on friendly terms with him. By the end of the month, Lisa started seeing someone new. However, concern arose when Lisa didn't show up for work on Wednesday, October 27th, and continued to be absent on Thursday and Friday, worrying her coworkers. In an interview with police, Lisa's boss mentioned that on Friday, she called him to say she was quitting and planned to work for another club. However, the next day, Saturday the 30th, she called him back and asked if she could come in to work. Lisa worked until 2 a.m. that night, which was the last time she was seen alive. She was scheduled to work on Tuesday, but never showed up. Her boss tried calling her to check in, but she didn't answer. He called again on Wednesday and Thursday, when she still didn't show up for work, but received no response. On Thursday, the housekeeper at the hotel where Lisa was living went to drop off clean linens but found a "Do Not Disturb" sign on her door handle. Hotel staff noticed this sign had been there for several days since the previous Saturday. The housekeeper knocked on the door but got no response. Concerned due to the prolonged "Do Not Disturb" sign, she entered the room and found Lisa's bruised body. The medical examiner determined she had likely been deceased for 4 days and died from strangulation. Investigators began their search for her killer, Lisa's ex-boyfriend underwent a polygraph test, which he passed. Police collected evidence from the scene, and fortunately, just a year before in 1993, Honolulu police began using a more effective method of storing DNA. However, the case eventually went cold. The next development came in the year 2000, when John Eric Armstrong, a sailor in the Navy, was suspected of Lisa's murder. Cecil Trent, who was 29 years old at the time of Lisa's death, emerged as a suspect. He had been linked to the deaths of some sex workers in the 90s while stationed around the country. However, he was ultimately ruled out as a suspect. In 2016, the Honolulu Police Department established a cold case unit called the Aioli Pogna Project, meaning never forgotten. In March 2020, HPD re-examined the fingerprints and DNA from the crime scene. They sent the DNA to Parabon Nanolabs to create a facial composite of the perpetrator based on his DNA. Genetic genealogist C.C. Moore looked into the case, leading to a DNA match. Cecil Trent was identified as a suspect. Trent passed away from congestive heart failure in 2013 at the age of 48, still living in Honolulu and leaving behind 3 children. After his death, his fingerprints were taken, and they matched those found at the crime scene. With confirmation through fingerprint and DNA matching, the case was considered solved in April 2022. In April 2005, 27-year-old Emma Caldwell worked as a sex worker in Glasgow's red light district. She had been battling drug addiction since her older sister passed away from cancer. As a child, she had a love for horses and was known for her kindness and consideration. Her family affectionately called her MJ, short for Emma Jane. Emma was last seen alive in the early hours of April 5th, and her loved ones reported her missing 5 days later. On May 8th, her body was discovered in the woods, 40 miles away from where she was last seen. She was found unclothed and had been strangled. Anna Wallace runs a support group in Glasgow called Salt and Light, which provides assistance to people, including sex workers, who are facing various challenges. Just days before her death, Emma had confided in Anna about a troublesome customer who had been making her feel unsafe. Other sex workers who knew Emma reported that a man named Ian Packer was fixated on her. Ian was a regular client of Emma's and drew police attention early on due to his history of domestic violence and aggression towards women. At least 4 other sex workers told the police that Ian had taken them to the same remote forest where Emma's body was discovered. Ian was interviewed 6 times between 2005 and 2007, vehemently denying any involvement in Emma's death. He claimed he never harmed Emma or any other woman. However, due to insufficient evidence, he was ultimately ruled out as a suspect. 2 years after Emma's death, police arrested and charged 4 Turkish men as part of a large undercover operation. On the day Emma disappeared, she received a 76-second phone call, traced to a Turkish man named Abu Bukir Onku, living in Glasgow. Onku had left Scotland for Turkey around the time of Emma's disappearance, which raised suspicions. Upon his return, Onku voluntarily cooperated with police interviews and provided DNA samples. However, police continued to monitor him, considering him a person of interest. An ex-girlfriend described him as controlling, and further investigations revealed allegations of sexual assault involving Turkish men in the area. This led police to focus their attention on the Turkish community in their search for answers. Detectives discovered that the last signal from Emma's phone came from the vicinity of the cafe where Turkish men were suspected to be involved. Police searched the cafe and monitored it for months. A significant breakthrough came when investigators found a spot of blood on a quilt in the cafe, positively identified as Emma's. Despite this, it wasn't enough evidence to charge anyone for her death, and the trail went cold. However, investigators persisted. In 2015, Police Scotland's major investigative team received instructions to dedicate more resources to reinvestigating the case. This year, Ian Packer, the original suspect, now 49 years old, was finally arrested and charged with Emma Caldwell's murder. He faces a total of 38 charges, including some for sexual assault and abductions in unrelated cases. The judge denied bail, and Packer did not enter a plea, expected to appear in court in the coming months. Further details about the evidence leading to his arrest will emerge during the court proceedings. Thank you for following along with this episode. If you don't want to miss any content from this channel, click the subscribe button. Your support through likes, shares, and comments helps us continue discussing these cases.